And I now offer the floor to the distinguished representative of Palau, speaking on behalf of Pacific Small Island Developing States.
Mr. President, I deliver this statement in my capacity as chair of the 12 Pacific Small Island Developing States represented in New York, and we align ourselves with the statements made by Samoa on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States and Fiji on behalf of the Pacific Islands Forum. On behalf of the PSIDS, I thank you, Mr. President, for convening this informal plenary meeting to engage with experts on this critical issue. For the Pacific SIDS, sea level rise poses an ever-increasing threat to our livelihoods, lands, culture, and heritage. I'd like to begin by painting a picture of what sea level rise actually looks like in a Pacific island. As we saw in the video earlier, many of our coastal villages have homes right on the shore, homes that have been there for many, many generations. With sea levels rising, many of our people who live on these shores have had their homes destroyed and have been displaced. When Secretary General Ban Ki-moon visited Kiribati in 2011, he was surprised to see the ocean infiltrate someone's kitchen during a high tide and watched as the tides inundated villages and roads. These are now regular occurrences in the Pacific Islands. So yes, adaptation is already required, but it's easier said than done. Mr. President, only 2% of adaptation funding has been accessed by small island developing states, making relocation difficult. We certainly must increase access to adaptation funding for small islands. But beyond funding, it remains very difficult to relocate and uproot people from their villages, which often anchor their identities and their livelihoods. Where will they get their food when their small subsistence farm is not nearby? How do you teach a fifth-generation fisherman to become a farmer? These are existential questions for us in the Pacific, made all the more apparent with sea level rise. In many atoll islands, like the Marshall Islands, Kiribati, and Tuvalu, the situation is more severe. Because atolls are at sea level, a 1-meter change in sea level doesn't just erode their beaches, which many of them rely on for tourism-based revenues, it also intrudes on their water tables and threatens their water security. This means less fresh water for human and livestock consumption, but also to water crops. In the Pacific, one of our major food crops is taro, which is farmed in wetland-type environments. Sea level rise also makes these types of agricultural products unfarmable and threatens our food security, as well as our cultural practices and our identities, which rely heavily on these food crops. Prolonged droughts, frequent floods, and severe and intense cyclones and typhoons are now a regular occurrence in our islands thanks to climate change. And these disasters leave catastrophic damage in their wake, and they simply become more damaging with sea level rise. When the sea levels rise past natural barriers such as coral reefs and mangroves and are higher on shore, a typhoon will cause storm surges that flood homes and villages. Additionally, Mr. President, when developing countries are forced to expend resources to mitigate and provide relief from climate disasters, we're left with less to spend on development. This means less investment in education, health, nutrition, infrastructure, social services, and training. This is particularly concerning in light of our inadequate access to grant and concessional financing to support our vulnerable position. In this context, we recall the 2021 Pacific Island Forum Leaders Declaration, stating that our maritime zones, as established and notified to the Secretary General of the United Nations, in accordance with the UN Convention Law of the Sea, and the rights and entitlements that flow from them, shall continue to apply without reduction, notwithstanding any physical changes connected to climate change-related sea level rise. Through the declaration, we reaffirm the legal statuses of such maritime zones, rights, and entitlements in the event of climate change-related sea level rise. Mr. President, we highlight that our greatest strengths lie in our culture, traditions, and ocean resources, along with our knowledge systems. These systems and the practices of indigenous peoples and local communities must be incorporated in adaptation measures, including biodiversity loss and nature-based solutions. We are committed to developing institutional and human capacities for integrated management of water resources, increasing agricultural productivity, coordination in response to disaster events, and we further stress the need for better data understanding, use and generation through initiatives like technology transfer and exchange of best practices. We look forward to continued dialogue with all member states as we collectively look to solve these challenges posed by sea level rise. Mr. President, thank you again for engaging with us in this timely meeting, and we look forward to more meaningful discussions, collaboration, and collective problem solving on these crucial issues. Thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Palau